not to fight with his son. He's always trying to make peace with his son, but his son is infuriated and very, very ambitious, because we're now going to see in the text. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this? This is just a review. And it all was sparked by a woman, by the rape of a sister, this whole thing. So you think that Absalom was justified in killing Amnon after his father did nothing? What do you think? I'm curious.
I don't think he's so bad that they say. I mean, he really defended his sister, took her in afterwards, comforted, and Amnon was really the jerk, the major jerk. So, but I don't know whether it's in his. It should be his deal to kill his brother, but David certainly didn't do anything.
Did nothing. And there's an implication. Yes, Rebecca.
I just need the clarification. Was Absalom in the line to be the next king?
Yes. Yes.
If Amnon was killed, then the next person would be Absalom.
It seems so. So yeah, was there that was that part of it, or is it like he's not fit to be king, or and was that the culture? I don't know about killing your brothers. It seems, unfortunately, if you look at the Torah, there's a long line of brothers killing or really hurting each other. That's why the blessing, when you bless your sons, you say, will you be like Ephraim and Manasseh? Because they were two brothers. They were the sons of Joseph, that there's no record that they quarreled. So the rabbis are desperately looking for some peaceful men to say, may you be like them, whereas we can go to Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah immediately, though Rachel and Leah had a bit of a rivalry. They didn't hurt each other. And they have to cast far and wide to find two peaceful brothers. And so it seems very violent. And what's interesting, though, it was done in a public place. It was done in the middle of a festival. So do you think that means anything? And I'm going to call on you, Panina, 1 second. And also, wait, I had another thought. It was done in a public place. Oh, that there is the suggestion in the commentary that David had lost the respect of the Israelites for doing nothing. So the story was known. And it says that he didn't do anything. And certainly as we'll read, his military commanders were very, dismayed by this and on different levels. Okay, Panina.
I am always looking to see results, like the fact that they married so many women and the fact that they had all these children. I think when we're talking about Absalom resentment of his father, I think it's the disability of the king to pay attention to so many of his own kids that upsets Absalom. He doesn't care what happens with Amnon. It's like he makes light of it. He doesn't pay attention to the daughter because her brother took her in. He doesn't pay attention now what's going on with Absalom, that he stays away for 3 years. I think the whole idea is that the whole stories keep on telling us all the stories that there was no surprise when in the 14th century, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gershon came up with a letter and a new law that forbade the men from marrying more than one woman. And the letter never got to Yemen. So when they brought the Yemenite Jews to Israel in 1950 something, they came at war with 2 wives, and they wanted to separate them. The women were so helpless without the men that they refused and they stayed, which shows you force of habit and how the culture literally trained the person to be incapable of taking care of themselves like we are doing today. So I'm looking at all those stories, and I'm always trying to think when I look at the whole Bible, okay, so what is it that we are learning from this? What's the positive and what's the negative. So having a lot of women and a lot of children, even if you are a king, was not a good idea.
Not a good idea. That's a really good point. Pamela, thank you. Pam.
Okay, well, I totally agree with Benina in terms of that, but I think it's an interesting indication of how all of these women essentially were their own household.
Right.
Meaning it's like the
Property.
mother
It's almost like
is
a harem.
their own fiefdom, right? So that the children of this mother had this sort of loyalty with each other, the other mother had different loyalties,
Yes.
and it almost seems like these fathers, the king, whomever, just treated the boys as if they were just not even their own offspring. They may be inheritors, they may be, you know, their successors, but you don't really see like paternal love in the way we think of it today.
Right.
So I
Well,
think that's sort of interesting that they,
Maybe they
but
even couldn't, even if they wanted to. That's the whole thing. Because of
Well-
all these responsibilities shows you that even nature as the cause by itself really doesn't allow maybe one person to be able to take care of every person that they're married to, or they
Okay,
of their
so
own offspring. They
let's-
just don't have the time or maybe the mental capacity.
Yes, but let's look at the text because King David did love Avshalom a lot.
Yes.
You will have favorites, and he seemed to have favorites. You know, Amnon was his first, so obviously he was attached to him. And we don't hear anything about Solomon until he's made king. So, and the thing that we're going to read now is Avshalom was so beautiful. And you know how when you have a beautiful child, sometimes you just can't
long
help it.
hair. Yeah.
So we're going to let's look at the text now. And hold on, share.
I have a question.
Yes.
Were there any laws? Were there any retribution for killing? People just got away with it. There was no.
No, of course there was, but he was like overlooking it because, well, first of all, he ran away.
Right.
Avshalom ran away, and if we're going to do a psychological, assessment of David, he probably realized I didn't do anything about Amnon. My daughter is, ruined. Her brother killed Amnon. What am I going to do? Kill my next in line? So when he ran away, it was kind of it's more like a coup. There will be a huge coup, Pam, coming up. Huge.
By
Thanks,
the
Pam.
way, I left out the fact that according to the Bible, Tamar actually lost her mind.
Oh,
She was like despondent. She like lost her mind. She was like she went crazy. So that's another factor that we are not talking about. That this
Right.
is very
it's a
important.
midrash or something.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to Bonnie for a second. So yes, of course there was retribution, there was justice and whatever all the time, but you were looking at a king and his sons, and that was perhaps why the people lost respect for him, because, for us, we would be executed, we would be in jail, we would be punished. But when your son does it, you're not doing anything. And the son was missing. He wasn't coming home. So here's where, let's see how he gets back and what
Thank you.
happens. Because it's very interesting. Now we're going to look at the actual text. Okay, so. All right, so this is just a little more. Absalom had fled and he came to the king of Geshur, and King David mourned over his son a long time. This is now in the Tanakh, in the text. And Absalom remained there 3 years, and King David was pining away for Absalom, for the king had gotten over Amnon's death. So now he was pining away. So we see he had it. Okay, so now, interestingly enough, because I didn't even realize this till I read the text, another woman is used as a messenger. We had like the witch, and now another woman, the men, when they want to tell something they're actually like, oh, you go do this. Let me send you in and you'll take care of this. So Pam, why don't you read Joab, son of Zeruiah, 14.
Joab, son of Zeruiah, could see that the king's mind was on Absalom. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought a clever woman from there, a clever woman. He said to her, pretend you are in mourning, put on mourning clothes and don't anoint yourself with oil, and act like a woman who has grieved a long time over a departed one. Go to the king and say to him thus and thus. And Joab told her what to say.
So it's like, okay, he's sending in someone, and already this woman, she's kind of looking like King David, if you know what I mean. The King David's in mourning, he's grieving, so he's kind of sending in something. Okay, go on.
The woman of Tekoa came to the king, flung herself face down to the ground, and prostrated herself. She cried out, help, O king. The king asked her, what troubles you? And she answered, alas, I am a widow. My husband is dead.
Also, I just want to point out that it seems like you could get to the king. You know, you could go there and beg for help or this or that, and he was available or accessible. So I thought that was interesting. Go ahead.
Is this like the first therapist projection kind of analysis? Okay, your maidservant had 2 sons. The 2 of them came to blows out in the fields where there was no one to stop them. And one of them struck the other and killed him.
Okay, so do we see the parallel here?
She's creating the wall for him to project onto. It's so interesting. Then the whole clan confronted your maidservant and said, hand over the one who killed his brother, that we may put him to death for the slaying of his brother, even though we wipe out the heir. Thus they would quench the last ember remaining to me and leave my husband without name or remnant upon the earth.
I love that. Just one second. I just love that idea of a remnant, that, you know, there's no remnant of you and your child is your remnant or your name. And it's so important to have someone to carry on, you know, this chain. And it's amazing how we Jews have been able to continue having remnants no matter how hard they've tried to, you know, blot us out. Go ahead.
Sherith, is Sherith the name, the Hebrew for remnant?
I don't know.
It's Sherit.
Sorry, yes.
Isn't that the name of the cantor?
No,
Sherit.
it's Kareth. It's Kareth with a K.
Oh, with a K, okay.
Yeah.
Kareth, not Sheriff.
Israel, I think, was one of the first synagogues in colonial America.
I think you're right. Sharit Yisrael. I think that was the one.
Sherit Israel. It's the remnants of Israel. Yeah.
But I think it was the name of the first synagogue, or first or second one in America.
In
Isn't that
colonial
the
America.
I think so, like in Newport, Rhode Island or something.
Or in
Okay.
New York, yeah.
Oh, okay. Continue.
The king said to the woman, go home. I will issue an order in your behalf.
So the king is saying, you know, I'm going to save your second son, is basically what you're saying. One more.
And the woman of Tekoa said to the king, my lord, may the guilt be upon me and upon my ancestral house. Your majesty and his throne are guiltless.
And
The king said, if anyone says anything more to you, have him brought to me and he will never trouble you again.
okay, so he's saying, you know, we're going to spare your son, the killer, basically, right? Because he's your heir. So that's what, you know, this reminds me, what other parable or metaphor who brought to David about what? Do you remember about when Bathsheba, he took Bathsheba?
Nathan did with the man with one beloved sheep, the poor man with one beloved sheep, and the wealthy one who had lots of sheep. And
Exactly. And he said, you're the man. So this is an interesting narrative device or character device of the writer of the text, you know, of telling these allegories or metaphorical stories as a way of learning that we all can learn at the same time. It's not just him, but it's all of us getting some kind of message. Okay. Stacy, do you want to read?
Sure. Okay. She replied, let your majesty be mindful of the Lord your God and restrain the blood avenger bent on destruction, so that my son may not be killed. And he said, as the Lord lives, not a hair of your son shall fall to the ground. Then the woman said, please let your maidservant say another word to my lord the king. Speak on, said the king.
So, by the way, you notice that this woman has no name. It's just the woman of Tekoa, which so we realize when a woman does have a name, she's significant, because a lot of times they name everybody and their son and their grandson and their great grandson and their servant and whatever, but when they don't name women a lot. So she's a woman, a clever woman, as Pamela pointed out. And don't forget, all of this has been told her to say. This is a script from Joab. This is a script that he coached her to speak to the king. We don't even know if she has sons. We have no idea. This is a story. He
Right.
said, say thus and thus. So
She might not be a widow too, right?
exactly. We have no idea. But she's a good actress. We can say
Clever
that.
script.
Okay, so continue, Stacy.
Okay. Then the woman said, please let your maidservant say another word to my lord the king. Speak on, said the king. And the woman said, why then have you planned the like against God's people? In making this pronouncement, your majesty condemns himself in that your majesty does not bring back his own banished one.
So why will you forgive, or you don't, your son will be safe, but your own banished one, Avshalom, is afraid to come home because he might be killed, is what she's implying. Continue.
We must all die. We are like water that is poured out on the ground and cannot be gathered up. God will not take away the life of one who makes plans so that no one may be kept banished.
So, God will keep your life. You'll live longer. You will not be punished if you bring back, if you unbanish your son, so to speak. Okay, Lori, why don't you read?
Okay. And the reason I have come to say these things to the king, my lord, is that the people have frightened me. Your maidservant thought I would speak to your majesty. Perhaps your majesty would act on his handmaid's plea. For your majesty would surely agree to deliver his handmaid from the hands of anyone who would seek to cut off both me and my son from the heritage of God.
Okay, just continue, because you're going to see something interesting.
Your maidservant thought, let the word of my lord the king provide comfort, for my lord the king is like an angel of God, understanding everything good and bad. May the Lord your God be with you.
Now remember, this is a script. So Joab knows exactly what to say to the king. And we know that the king loves having compliments. Oh, sorry, I will bring this back down. Compliments from women. We've had them before where a woman, beseeching him softly with compliments and saying you're like an angel and good and bad. This is music in David's ears. Okay, now just read the next two paragraphs.
First on the top.
In reply.
Okay, in reply, the king said to the woman, do not withhold from me anything I ask you. The woman answered, let my lord the king speak. The king asked, is Joab in league with you in all this?
So he knows
Pretty
his
smart.
friend. He knows Joab. They've been together since, I don't know, he ran away, many years ago. This sounds like some, is this Joab? Obviously.
He put this up, yeah.
Okay, so let's stop for a minute. Why do you think he suspected Joab had sent her? What do you think then the Joab may have been saying up till now? Any ideas?
Is Joab in a good relationship with Absalom?
Well, he's in good relationship with David. He's his general. Yes. He's the one that he sent the letter, kill Bathsheba's husband. And he did it. Remember, he said, put him in the front line. Joab has been his collaborator, his right-hand man, his general. He's his chief of staff. He's his 5-star general. He's his, Pentagon, guy, and probably one of his oldest friends. So, Joab knows him better than anyone. And it seems like maybe Job had already said, you need to bring him back. You're just moping around. You're so lonely. You're not doing your job. You're depressed, this and that. Well, then bring him back already. No, I don't know. I don't know if I can. Well, look, blah, 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 blah. So he said, all right. I know one thing that always works with David, women.
That's it.
Women
That's
work
it.
with David. We've seen Abigail changed his mind. You know what I mean? You know, he resorted to what he knows works with David. Anybody have any thoughts about this? I see Pamela, what is this, a picture? Yeah, I know that does look like, oh, it's Shereth Israel. Yeah, it looks, that's interesting. Okay, so what do you think David does before we read what he did? What do you think he did? What would, knowing David? Come on, we know him by now. What do you think? It can't be wrong. It's an opinion. Take a jump. What do you think?
With her.
No. But what do you think he did toward?
Well, I thought that was a good
That's
guess.
good. I like that, actually. That's hilarious. He slept with her. What do you think he did toward Absalom? Lori.
Well, I think that if he knew that he was being played, that he might not do what Joab had set up, and he might just choose to do the opposite.
Okay. But based on his track record, if you look at a woman's appeal, what does it usually happens?
He follows it. He'll bring Absalom back.
He usually does. Because the women appeal to his emotions, not to his logic. They don't appeal to his brain. They know how to talk, and especially saying, you are like an angel and you know right from wrong. You know, it's like, well, whatever I say, it's God's will. It's like Henry VIII always felt like whatever happened, it was, you know, God was telling him this or that. Everything was a sign from God. So, you know, if she says, you're like an angel, you know right from wrong, you know, why would you allow compassion for my son, but not for your own son? And this is what he really wanted to do anyway, obviously, I think. So, Cindy, why don't you, hold on, let me first share. I got to go to share first. And then here it is, open. Okay. And then he said, was Joab in league all this? Go ahead, right here. The woman replied.
The woman replied, as you live, my lord the king, it is just as my lord the king says. Yes, your servant Joab was the one who instructed me, and it was he who told your maid servant everything she was to say. It was to conceal the real purpose of the matter that your servant Joab did this thing. My lord is as wise as an angel of God, and he knows all that goes on in the land.
I just love the schmaltz. That the women know what to say. You know, I actually think it'd be really fun for like a few days for us to all try biblical tactics on men and see what happens. I'm serious. Wouldn't that be fun? We should try that. I'm going to try.
Just go live in Texas. Just go live in Texas.
That's how they do it?
Oh my God, they get everything they want.
But
no, they are, I spent high school, college years there. So it was an interesting training in feminine wiles because they were not weak. These were not weak women. They were smart. They were behind the scenes. They could make things happen. One of my tried and true Texas girlfriends, who's about 10 years older, I said, so any advice before I got married? She said, yes, ask a lot of questions. Like, honey, would you mind blah, blah, blah? Like ask questions of, would you do this for me? Would you want to go to the store? Like, and so it makes it their idea. And it was utterly brilliant. I watched these women work and I was like, how in the world? But
does it work, Pamela? Does it work?
I don't do it anymore. I should. But I would say that I've seen it work. There was a time when there were 5 women mayors in the state of Texas.
Yep.
So there aren't that maybe there's 6 major cities. I mean, so it's very political in a way, right? It's that very back room arm twisting in a kind of soft way. It does work actually. But once women began being more in our own right and not having to work behind men, then that changed. But I think if we forget that backwards way, we also lose half the conversation. Because you watch men do it too. Men do it with women. I watched them do it like in the courthouse back when I was a young lawyer. And the women, they were all women who worked behind the desk. And there was a room like up on the 10th floor or somewhere far away that had like all the staplers and everything that lawyers need to do whatever they needed in the courthouse. And the women would go and they would be like, you know, very assertive, and the men would all come and say, oh, honey, can I just borrow your stapler for a minute? And it was like, oh, sure. But if like a woman asked that, they're up on the 10th floor. So it's not just women who do it with men. Men do it with women. It just is less obvious.
Right.
To women, to
Okay.
women.
All right. Well, anyone who has like a significant man in your life, try it for a day, biblical tactics, and come back and report and see what happens. Say, oh, you're like an angel. You're such an angel. Let's see what happens. Okay, so Cindy, keep reading.
Then the king said to Joab, I will do this thing. Go and bring back my boy Absalom. Joab flung himself face down on the ground and prostrated himself. Joab blessed the king and said, today your servant knows that he has found favor with you, my lord king, for your majesty has granted his servant's request.
So I guess Joab was like lurking nearby listening to this whole thing, because if he heard this and then he appears, so he was, like in the wings, so to speak, listening to see what would happen. Okay, keep going.
And Joab went at once to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. But the king said, let him go directly to his house and not present himself to me. So Absalom went directly to his house and did not present himself to the king.
So he said, okay, you can come back, but I don't want to see you. So it's kind of you're not in danger of retribution, but I can't look at you. I can't look at you yet, or whatever. Now I put this in italics because I thought it was really interesting, all of this, because it has significant impact later, very important impact. So Cindy, read this part.
No one in all Israel was so admired for his beauty as Absalom. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, he was without blemish. When he cut his hair, he had to have it cut every year, for it grew too heavy for him. The hair of his head weighed 200 shekels by the royal weight.
So he must have had this thick, luxuriant, I imagine, black, long hair, and been so handsome. He was like, what was the name of that model with the long hair? Oh, what was his name?
Fabio.
It's like Fabio or something.
My era.
Yeah, gorgeous man. And, even psychologically, we know that handsome and beautiful people are preferred for leadership, and that they're given the benefit of the doubt. If you're a beautiful woman or a really handsome man, people will give you a pass on a lot of things, and that people prefer tall leaders, good-looking leaders, and it's not even conscious, or maybe it is, but you're just
Unconscious.
an incredible beauty is rare. It's not that common. So there's even a blessing for when you see a truly beautiful person.
Really?
To say, because it's such a rare thing, and I can't remember what it is, but I'll find it. But I know there are like 100 blessings that you should be able to say, and one of them is for seeing a beautiful person. So, and we can only imagine that Tamar, his sister, was similarly beautiful. Same genes. And why did Amnon lust after her? She must have been. They don't say they were twins, but well, they couldn't have been, they would have been fraternal anyway, but that she was probably extremely beautiful herself and desirable. And, you know, that's what you imagine a prince and a princess should look like.
Well, David was called beautiful too. He was good looking.
I don't know if he was he
I think
called
so.
beautiful?
Nicholas
Not to such a degree.
Models him on Greek.
Yeah, but not such a degree as to say he was out blemished from the crown of his head to the sole of his foot. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, David, I think, had red hair for some reason. I don't know why. I think he was ruddy or whatever. I'm sure he was handsome. But I think Absalom, there's handsome and then there's beautiful. And then here, Absalom had 3 sons and a daughter whose name was Tamar. She was a beautiful woman. So he had a beautiful daughter named Tamar that he named for his sister. Tamar is a very common name in Israel. It used to be of a certain age. I don't know anymore, but Tamar is. And Absalom lived in Jerusalem 2 years without appearing before the king. So he didn't see his father for 2 years. So now they hadn't seen each other for 5 years. He was 3 years with Geshur, his grandfather, 2 years in Jerusalem in the same city. Very handsome guy walking around. King would not see him. So how do you think that affected? Oh, and then Absalom said, oh, okay. Yeah, we got to read this. What time is it? Okay. All right. So Pnina, this shows us something about Absalom. How old do you think he was at this point, by the way? 30s or 40s? 30s or 40s? It wasn't like a teen or anything. 30s, probably 30s, I would say. Okay. So, Pnina. And Absalom sent for Joab. I know she's unmuting, I presume. Pnina?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that he didn't call him or see him because politically it wouldn't show a very good example that the king excuses what happened with with Tamar.
No, I
If he
think
would
you're
right
right.
away call him back, and I mean, I think he should have. The fact that he didn't call him back, it shows to the people that he is not avenging his own daughter's death. So
But he's not
it's a dilemma here that he never called him. That's bad. That was a bad thing to the subject, to the whole country.
Well, he didn't want, well, let's see. Continue. Read this part.
So
now.
where are we?
Then Absalom sent for Joab.
Okay. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king, but Joab could not come to him. He sent for him a second time, but he would not come.
Okay, so then he sent to Joab saying, get me to see my father. And Joab didn't answer.
Right.
He sent him a second time and Joab is ignoring him. I got you here. You're on your own. I can't do that much for you, whatever, Okay, so what does Absalom do? Go ahead, Pnina.
So where are we now? Absalom
Right here.
replied to Joab?
Now, Absalom said to his servant.
Oh, so Absalom said to his servants, look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he is barely there. Go and set it on fire. Ooh. And Absalom's servant set the field on fire. Joab came at once to Absalom's house and said to him, why did your servant set fire to my field? Absalom replied to Joab, I sent for you to come here. I wanted to send you to the king to say on my behalf, why did I leave Geshur? Would be better off if I were still there. Now let me appear before the king, and if I'm guilty of anything, let him put me to death. Joab went to the king and reported to him, whereupon he summoned Absalom. He came to the king and flung himself face down to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom.
Okay, so
finally they see each other.
Okay, so finally, but what do we think about the way that Absalom got Joab's attention?
He got his attention.
Yeah.
It's like,
And
go set his, any comments about that?
Punitive.
He seems kind of impulsive and
He's
dramatic, he wanted to avenge his sister. He didn't go to the king and say, dude, what are you doing? Why don't you avenge this? He went and just killed the guy. Then he wants to get his dad's attention, so he sets the field on fire. So it's kind of extreme.
And also, I think it's interesting. Do you notice this, or is this meaningful to you, that he didn't go to Yoav? He wanted Yoav to come to him.
Right.
And when he wouldn't come to him, he set his field on fire to make him come to him. So there is some sense of, I'm the prince. You have to come to me. It seems that what I'm reading into that, because why couldn't he have gotten on his horse and gone over to see Yoav? Or unless Yoav lived in the palace or in the palace grounds and he couldn't go in there, he wasn't feeling safe to go in there. And that's why he didn't go. So I'm not sure either way, but his methodology, he didn't send a woman to beg. He could have sent a woman. He didn't. And so now the king and Avshalom have made peace. So what do you think? Do you think Avshalom's going to be content with this situation now that he's back in his father's good graces?
No,
No.
the introduction.
Too ambitious.
He's too ambitious, exactly. And so but he's also highly intelligent, and look at his what's the word? His manipulation and his subversive behavior. Okay, and we're hearing somebody's voice in the
Meryl's.
Oh, something else is, wait a minute. I think that there are always going to be issues between them because of their expectations of each other or one another. But I also think that they're just the kind of people that are manipulative and want what they want.
Okay, well, why don't you read what he did? Because you'll see.
I don't have it in front of me.
I'm going to show it to you right now.
Okay.
Hold on, let me get there. Okay.
He also facing it Tamar again when he comes home.
That's right.
Am I reading
her
15?
depression and her craziness, and that's not a good thing. It's like back in your face, this whole situation.
That's true.
Am I
Okay.
reading 15?
Yes.
Sometime afterward, Absalom provided himself with a chariot, horses, and 50 outrunners.
Okay, so I just want to, all right,
Yeah.
we'll read this. But in the other commentary, if we go back, we'll either do it this time or next time. Having a chariot is extremely rare, extremely showy, extremely powerful. To have a chariot and 50 men running in front of you, you know what I mean? It's like before you enter anywhere, there's 50 foot soldiers or footmen, and then a man in a chariot. It would be like a Rolls Royce, a motorcade. It would be like a motorcade with the limo or the Rolls Royce, all these other cars in front of you, like these black SUVs, like the FBI or the Secret Service, and then this motorcade limo or Rolls Royce or whatever. And this is what he just started doing on a daily basis. So right away, you think this guy is important, extremely important in power.
Iron was not available. The story, Jabotinsky thought that Samson stole the gate, the iron gate from the Philistine, because he wanted to see what kind of compound it was, the metal. And actually, the Israelites never had steel, iron. So to show up with a chariot was also a fact that he brought with him from another country, something that they never had and never used before. So
Wow,
that's
that's
very, that shows a lot of, And that's what he said. That's why Samson stole the gate. Remember the story that he carried the gate?
That was
He
before.
wanted to see what is it all about? What is it made out of? Because they had no iron.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. Merle.
Absalom used to rise early and stand by the road to the city gates. And whenever a man had a case that was to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" And he answered, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe in Israel." Absalom would say to him, "It is clear that your claim is right and just, but there is no one assigned to you by the king to hear it. And Absalom went on, if only I were appointed if only I were appointed judge in the land, and everyone has a legal dispute came before me, I would see that he got his rights.
So he's, the guy comes for the courts for whatever, and he says, oh, there's no judge for you. There's no one to adjudicate your case. Oh, if only I were judge. If I were appointed, then you would come before me and I would be able to make sure you got what was coming to you.
He's Jacoby and Myers.
It's hilarious. He's Jacoby and Myers. And he's also undermining the king. He's undermining the court. Okay, a little more, Merle.
And Absalom went, oh, wait. And if a man approached to bow him.
No. And Absalom went, oh, no, you're right.
Okay. And if a man approached to bow to him, Absalom would extend his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Absalom did this to every Israelite who came to the king for judgment. Thus, Absalom won away the hearts of the men of Israel.
Okay, so he was like standing in the court and he was, oh, if only I would help you. And oh, how do you do it? Oh, it's so good to see you. And everybody's going, wow, this powerful, handsome, beautiful human being with this chariot and all these things. He's noticing me. He's hugging, kissing me. Wow. Now, this is a weird thing because in Hebrew, it has to be wrong. It says after a period of 40 years, it's got to be 4. It's like wrong. It's written wrong because it wasn't 40 years. It was 4.
Oh.
Okay. So then he has another plot. Okay. Lori, have you read?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll read
okay.
it again. Okay.
Did anyone not read? Somebody didn't read. I saw there were a bunch of people. Who has not read?
I didn't read.
Okay, Rebecca.
After a period of 4 years had gone by, Absalom said to the king, let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow that I made to the Lord. For your servant made a vow when I lived in Geshur of Aram. If the Lord ever brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord. The king said to him, go in peace. And so he set out for Hebron.
Okay, so that's, Hebron, which still exists. That's on the West Bank. And there was no temple at this time because it wasn't until Solomon that there was a temple. So at this point, there were these different altars or sanctuaries. And there was the nearest one from Jerusalem is Hebron. It's very close, Hebron to Jerusalem. And do you remember the last time he said to the king, let me go out and do something? He said, let me go out and go to the sheep shearing festival. Remember? And it was a ruse. And again, I mean, it's sort of like people are very consistent in their patterns. So again, it's a ruse. So continue, Rebecca. We only have a few minutes. Then we'll go on.
But Absalom sent agents to all the tribes of Israel to say, when you hear the blast of the horn, announce that Absalom has become king in Hebron.
All right. The horn is the shofar, by the way. Okay.
200 men of Jerusalem accompanied Absalom. They were invited and went in good faith, suspecting nothing.
Okay. So in the commentary, it suggests that these 200 men of Jerusalem were like well-known men. They were officials. They were prominent men. And they came in good faith and they suspected nothing. And Absalom had his own like private army and they kind of got trapped. And, also it looked from the outside looking in like, all right, so how did it look? It's like if you invented all the officials of the city of LA, 200, the top officials, businessmen, everything, and then you're in a room and then you announce you're running for president, it looks like they support you. Like they're with you. They're there. And so there's this idea that they went there suspecting nothing, and suddenly it looks like they're on his side, and all the people rallied toward Avshalom. And we didn't next time, because it's such an amazing story, what Avshalom does to David, what happens to him, and Joab has a huge part in this. Very dramatic. Also very important. There's some women who are very prominent in the next part, but we need to understand the whole background of this. this story, which is when King David is still pretty much at the height of his, kingship, because, then he starts to fade, and that's when the whole Bathsheba thing starts to happen. And his son, and this is all from this curse that we heard Nathan give him, that your own family will turn on each other. And he actually says that somebody will humiliate your wives in public. And we're going to see that next time. So I want to wish you a lovely week. This is
Have
so
a great
fun.
week.
You're my favorite class. We always do such juicy things. I'll see you next
so
time.
much.
Okay. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
Bye,
Be
everybody.
well.
Beautiful week, everyone. Thank
I'm gonna
you.
look
This
at
was
air
great
fear.
as usual.
Be well, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.